Who's actually going to get the most out of a countertop electric slicer? And who would be better off putting their money toward a good chef's knife instead? Is the price justified for a family that makes sandwiches every day? Or does it only make sense for a deli that needs to keep up with a constant flow of orders? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you walk into a kitchen supply aisle and see a machine that promises precision and consistency in every slice, the first thing that pops into most people's heads is the fear of buying something that sounds great on paper, but ends up collecting dust because it's either too complicated or simply unnecessary. I've spent a lot of time watching home chefs and small business owners wrestle with that dilemma, especially when it comes to slicers. The Vollrath 40951 is marketed as a medium-duty, belt-driven unit with a 12-inch blade, a built-in sharpener, and an adjustable thickness knob. What you really need to know is how those claims translate into a day-to-day workflow, how much space it will actually take on your countertop, and whether the performance gap between good enough and great matters for you. Let's start with the kind of kitchen that benefits most from a machine like this. If you run a boutique sandwich shop, a cheese counter, or a catering service that regularly needs uniform slices of roast beef, turkey, or provolone, the ability to set a thickness and walk away while the slicer does the work is a huge time saver. The belt-driven design means the motor runs smoother and quieter than a gear-driven competitor, so you can slice a full platter of pastrami without the whole shop shaking. The built-in sharpener is more than a gimmick. After a few hours of use, you'll notice the blade staying razor-sharp longer, which cuts down on the need to pull the unit apart for a separate sharpening stone. That consistency shows up in the final product. Each slice of turkey ends up the same thickness, which is the difference between a sandwich that looks professional and one that looks like a rushed assembly. For a home cook, the value proposition is a little different. Imagine you're prepping for a weekend gathering and you need a thin, even layer of smoked salmon for a bagel bar, or you want to make a batch of homemade cheese sticks with uniform breaded coating. Pulling a manual slicer or a large chef's knife can be tedious and uneven, especially if you're not accustomed to a steady hand. With the Vollrath, you set the thickness dial, feed the product through the carriage, and the blade does the heavy lifting. The removable carriage is handy for cleaning. You can slide it out, wipe the blade, and pop it back in without fiddling with a bunch of screws. That ease of maintenance is a real advantage if you only slice once a week. You won't be staring at a greasy blade trying to remember how to reassemble it. Now, let's talk about who should probably walk away. If you're someone who slices only on occasion, maybe you make a roast once a month and never need to slice deli meats. The upfront cost and countertop footprint might not be worth it. A decent chef's knife or a manual slicer can handle those occasional jobs just fine, and you'll avoid the learning curve that comes with feeding food into a motorized carriage. Similarly, if you run a high-volume operation that processes whole hams, large roasts, or industrial-strength cuts, the medium-duty label means this unit will start to feel strained. The 12-inch blade is generous for most sandwich shop needs, but it can accommodate a whole turkey leg without some awkward maneuvering, and the motor may struggle with very dense, fatty cuts, causing the blade to bog down. Practical strengths are easier to pin down than marketing buzzwords. First, the cast aluminum construction gives the slicer a solid, stable base that doesn't wobble when you apply pressure. That stability translates into cleaner cuts because the blade stays true to its plane. Second, the adjustable thickness knob offers a surprisingly fine range, from paper-thin for prosciutto to a few millimeters for heartier meats, and you can lock it in place without constantly readjusting. Third, the built-in sharpener, as mentioned, reduces downtime. I've seen users who keep the slicer on a prep line for several hours. The blade stays sharp enough that the slices don't start to tear, which is a common complaint with cheaper models. On the flip side, there are some hidden trade-offs. Because it's a countertop unit, you need at least a foot of clearance behind it for the carriage to slide out and for you to feed material safely. In a cramped kitchen that's already juggling mixers, coffee machines, and a dishwasher, finding that space can be a real challenge. The control knob, while sturdy, isn't digital, so you won't get a numeric readout of the exact thickness. You're relying on visual checks and trial runs. For a professional setting where exactness matters down to the millimeter, that may be a deal breaker. Also, the motor's 120-volt requirement means